Section 1. You're sitting on the couch, staring at your phone. The notifications are coming in, but you feel detached from everything. You look at your partner across the room, but it doesn't feel like you're really together. The space between you both feels vast, even though you're in the same room. You feel a twinge of frustration, but you don't know how to express it. You go through the motions of saying goodnight, but something lingers in the air, something unspoken. You've been here before, haven't you? You're technically in a relationship, but something doesn't feel right. You're not physically alone, but emotionally, you might as well be. Have you ever experienced this? You're sharing your life with someone, and yet, in the quiet moments, you feel more isolated than ever. You might be surrounded by people or even right next to someone you care about, but emotionally, you're just alone. The sense of connection seems to be missing. This feeling creeps in slowly, but eventually, it leaves you wondering, why does this relationship feel more like a roommate situation than a partnership? Why do you feel like you're giving more than you're receiving emotionally, and why is it that you feel unseen, unheard, and distant despite your best efforts? The truth is, loneliness in a relationship isn't just about being physically alone, it's about emotional disconnect. You could be lying next to your partner, holding their hand, and still feel this growing chasm between you. It's the loneliness that arises from a lack of emotional intimacy, where you're both there, but not really there for each other. It's not just a temporary issue, it's a sign that something is being neglected in your relationship. And it's easy to think that you're the problem, but that's not true. It's not about fault, it's about an unmet need that's gone unspoken for too long. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. If left unchecked, this emotional disconnection can wear down the fabric of your relationship. Over time, it leads to frustration, miscommunication, and distance. You might start wondering whether you're simply going through the motions, staying in the relationship out of habit or fear of being truly alone. If this feeling continues, you'll start questioning if the relationship is even worth it anymore. You might even wonder if you're settling for something less than what you truly want and need. So, what's at stake if this loneliness continues unchecked? The cost can be high. Emotional exhaustion becomes a part of your daily routine. You may begin withdrawing because you're not getting the emotional support you need, and that withdrawal only feeds the cycle of loneliness. It's not just a temporary phase. This sense of isolation can lead to emotional numbness, which makes it harder to connect, communicate, or even care about fixing things. The longer you stay in this pattern, the more you risk damaging a relationship that could otherwise be fulfilling, supportive, and deeply connected. But here's the good news, it doesn't have to stay this way. Loneliness in a relationship is not a permanent condition, and it doesn't mean your relationship is doomed. In fact, it's a signal. It's a sign that you need to reconnect, not just with your partner, but with yourself and your emotional needs. The solution isn't just about waiting for your partner to notice. It's about taking proactive steps to create the connection you both need. In this lesson, we're going to break down how you can transform this loneliness into an opportunity for growth, both individually and as a couple. By the end of this video, you'll know how to identify what emotional needs aren't being met in your relationship and, more importantly, how to start honest conversations about those needs without blaming or pleading. You'll walk away with the tools to stop abandoning yourself just to keep the relationship intact. You'll learn how to create a healthy, emotionally fulfilling connection where both partners are seen, heard, and valued. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's dive into why this emotional disconnect happens in the first place. First, we'll explore how loneliness sneaks into relationships and why so many people feel this way despite being in committed partnerships. After that, we'll challenge the belief that feeling emotionally distant means something is wrong with you or your relationship. We'll look at how unmet needs, whether they're unspoken or misunderstood, can create this distance. Then, we'll apply Stoic principles to help you understand the role of emotional control and reflection in improving your connection with your partner. Next, we'll discuss how to recognize your emotional needs and communicate them effectively to your partner. This isn't about blaming anyone for disconnecting, it's about identifying what's missing and learning how to express it in a way that brings both of you closer. Then, we'll walk through practical exercises and steps you can take today to start creating a deeper, more meaningful connection. Finally, we'll share a real-life example that shows exactly how applying these Stoic techniques can transform those difficult, emotionally charged moments in relationships and turn them into opportunities for growth and connection. In just a bit, we'll go through a scenario where these techniques really pay off, showing how a simple Stoic approach can save you from emotionally spiraling in the middle of a tough conversation. But before we get there, let's take a moment to reflect. When was the last time you felt that emotional distance with your partner? What was it that made you feel isolated, even when they were physically there? Let's begin this journey by acknowledging the emotional disconnect and learning how we can address it head-on. Section 2. Have you ever had that feeling when you're talking to your partner, but somehow, it feels like they're not really listening? Or worse, that you're not being understood at all? That subtle but persistent feeling of being invisible, even though you're both physically present, is a painful reality for many people in relationships. Emotional disconnect doesn't always look like an argument or a dramatic fallout. Sometimes, it's more insidious. It's the absence of the small things that make a relationship feel intimate, those moments of shared understanding, emotional support, and simple, honest communication. It's the gap between what you need emotionally and what you're actually receiving. Let's pause for a moment. Think about the last time you felt disconnected from your partner. Was it something they said or didn't say? Or was it a moment when you reached out for connection, only to feel that their response, or lack of response, left you feeling more alone than before? Now, picture how that moment made you feel. Did it trigger any deeper fears or insecurities? Often, those feelings of isolation stem from the belief that your emotional needs are not being met. And when this pattern continues, it can lead to a deeper sense of loneliness that's hard to shake. Why does this happen? Emotional disconnect often begins when people stop actively listening to each other. We all have emotional needs for understanding, support, validation, and affection, but when those needs aren't recognized, we start feeling unheard, unseen, and isolated. The problem is that these needs often go unspoken. We assume that our partner should be able to read our minds or automatically know what we need. But no one can meet your emotional needs unless you communicate them clearly. If you never express your feelings or desires, your partner has no way of knowing what you truly need. Over time, this lack of emotional transparency builds a wall between you. This is a classic case of miscommunication. The more we suppress our emotional needs or assume that others should intuitively understand them, the more isolated we feel. In a relationship, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if your partner truly cares, they will just get what's wrong without you having to say anything. But here's the thing, most of the time, they won't. We all have different ways of expressing and understanding emotions, and unless we share our feelings with clarity, we risk leaving those emotional needs unmet. So, what can we do to fix this? The first step is to recognize that your emotional needs are valid and worth expressing. This isn't about blaming your partner or expecting them to magically meet your needs without effort. It's about acknowledging that, in any relationship, both partners have to actively engage in ensuring each other's emotional needs are met. This means learning how to articulate what's missing and creating a dialogue that invites understanding rather than defensiveness. For example, if you're feeling disconnected from your partner because they haven't been emotionally available, instead of bottling up those feelings or assuming they should know, try saying something like, "I've been feeling a little distant lately, and I really miss feeling emotionally close to you. I need more quality time with you, without distractions, just us talking and connecting." This type of communication doesn't blame or accuse, it simply expresses a need and opens the door for a productive conversation. Now, let's break down the why behind this approach. Why does this work? The answer is simple: people connect better when they understand each other's needs clearly. The moment you articulate your feelings, you're offering your partner an opportunity to understand where you're coming from. It's no longer a vague feeling of distance, but a concrete emotional need that they can address. And when this happens, your partner doesn't have to guess what you need. They can respond in a way that makes you feel seen, heard, and valued. This level of emotional clarity strengthens the relationship and creates the foundation for mutual respect and empathy. Here's a microscript that can help you navigate this conversation. I need to feel more emotionally connected to you. It's important for me that we have some time together where we can talk and really connect. Can we work on that together? It's direct, clear, and doesn't carry an accusatory tone. Instead of saying, "You never spend time with me," you're expressing your emotional need in a way that invites your partner to collaborate with you on the solution. Now, let's take a look at how this approach plays out in a real-life scenario. Picture this: you've had a long, stressful day at work, and all you want is some emotional support when you get home. Instead, your partner is preoccupied with their own tasks, barely acknowledging your presence. You feel the tension rising, and before long, that old pattern kicks in: you feel invisible, dismissed. In the past, you might have stayed quiet, silently stewing in your feelings of neglect. But this time, you try something different. You take a deep breath, collect your thoughts, and then approach your partner calmly. "Hey, I know we've both had long days, but I really need some emotional support right now. Can we talk for a bit?" The difference here is that you're not accusing them of ignoring you. You're simply stating what you need and inviting them to engage. Your partner, seeing the openness in your approach, can now respond with understanding rather than defensiveness. This shift in communication doesn't happen overnight, but with practice, it becomes second nature. And here's the key: you don't just wait for the perfect moment to express your needs, you proactively create those moments by being open and honest. This doesn't mean being demanding or expecting your partner to meet all your needs. It means being willing to express your emotions in a way that encourages understanding and collaboration. Now, let's look at one tiny action you can take today to start addressing this emotional disconnect. Pick one emotional need you've been neglecting to express, whether it's more attention, emotional support, or simply spending more quality time together, and communicate it clearly to your partner. It doesn't have to be a grand conversation. It can be as simple as, "I've been feeling a little disconnected lately, and I think it would really help if we could spend more time together, just talking and connecting." This tiny action will open the door to deeper communication and create an environment where emotional needs are not only recognized but also met. Before we move forward, let's take a moment to practice. I want you to close your eyes for a second and think about the last time you felt emotionally disconnected from your partner. Now, take a deep breath and ask yourself, what is it that I needed at that moment? Whether it was attention, reassurance, or just a listening ear, acknowledge that need. Then, picture yourself expressing that need to your partner calmly and directly. How does it feel to put that into words? This small act of self-reflection will help you realize how much power you have in fostering deeper emotional connection. In our next section, we'll continue to explore how to maintain this level of emotional transparency over time, and how you can transform these small conversations into lasting changes in your relationship. Section 3. Think about the last time you truly felt emotionally connected to someone. I'm not talking about a brief moment of shared laughter or an easy conversation about your day. I mean the moments when you felt understood, deeply seen, and valued in a way that was both comforting and energizing. These are the moments that form the foundation of true emotional intimacy. When emotional intimacy is present, it feels like you're both on the same wavelength, like there's no need to hide behind walls or pretenses. You can simply be yourself, and that alone makes you feel secure, loved, and connected. Now, let's take a moment and reflect. Do you feel emotionally intimate with your partner? Or do you often find yourself wondering why the connection seems to be fading, despite the fact that you're still together? Emotional intimacy doesn't happen overnight. It's built over time, through consistent, open communication and a willingness to be vulnerable with each other. The challenge, however, is that many people don't know how to cultivate that kind of intimacy or even recognize when it's lacking. So, what exactly is emotional intimacy? At its core, it's the ability to be emotionally open with your partner without fear of judgment or rejection. It's about sharing your true feelings, your deepest desires, and your vulnerabilities in a way that strengthens the bond between you. But emotional intimacy doesn't just happen, it requires effort from both partners. You can't force it, but you can nurture it through your actions and communication. When emotional intimacy is absent, it often leads to emotional distance, misunderstandings, and loneliness, even within the same relationship. Here's the thing, emotional intimacy isn't about how much time you spend together, it's about how present you are during that time. You could spend hours with your partner, but if the emotional connection isn't there, the time you spend together can feel empty. The key is creating opportunities for real emotional connection. And to do that, you need to stop treating your relationship like a checklist of things to do and start treating it as a dynamic process that requires consistent emotional engagement. When you stop making time for emotional connection, it's easy to slip into a routine where both partners are physically present, but emotionally unavailable. This is when the loneliness creeps in and the emotional disconnection deepens. It's not that you don't care about each other, it's simply that you've stopped prioritizing the emotional connection that holds the relationship together. But how do you cultivate emotional intimacy if it's been lacking for a while? The first step is to create a space for honest, open communication. This means being vulnerable and allowing yourself to express your true feelings, even if it's uncomfortable. It means asking your partner about their feelings, their needs, and their desires, not just once, but as an ongoing conversation. Emotional intimacy thrives on openness and reciprocity. When one partner feels heard, it encourages the other to share their own feelings. It's a cycle that builds trust and connection, one conversation at a time. The next step is to make emotional connection a priority in your relationship. This doesn't mean having deep conversations every single day, but it does mean making time for moments of emotional engagement. Whether it's a quiet moment before bed, a deep conversation on a walk, or even sharing something personal during dinner, these moments are opportunities to build emotional intimacy. You don't need grand gestures, small, consistent moments of connection are just as powerful. Let's break it down with an example. Imagine this, you've had a long, tiring week, and your partner seems distant. Maybe they're preoccupied with their work, or perhaps they're distracted by something else. In the past, you might have shrugged it off or, worse, internalized it, assuming that it's just how things are. But today, instead of letting the disconnection simmer, you decide to take action. You pull your partner aside and say, "I've noticed that we've been a little distant lately. I miss our conversations, and I want to feel more emotionally connected with you. Can we talk about what's been going on?" This simple statement opens the door to a deeper conversation. By expressing your feelings without blaming or accusing, you invite your partner to share their own emotions and needs. Now, why does this work? It works because it breaks the cycle of emotional avoidance. When we don't address the emotional disconnect, it often snowballs. What seems like a small issue, like a missed conversation or a distracted moment, can quickly grow into a larger emotional divide. By addressing it early on, you prevent the disconnect from becoming a pattern, and you create an opportunity for both partners to express their needs and desires openly. This kind of proactive communication fosters emotional intimacy and builds a strong foundation of trust. But what if your partner doesn't immediately respond the way you hope? What if they seem defensive or dismissive? In these moments, it's important to stay grounded and patient. Emotional intimacy takes time to develop, and it's important to remember that both partners may have their own emotional baggage to work through. If your partner is resistant to opening up, don't take it personally. Instead, continue to create a space where they feel safe to share their feelings, even if it takes time. Here's a simple microscript to help you navigate moments of emotional disconnection. "I've been feeling a little distant lately, and I really want us to reconnect. Can we talk about what's been going on, so we can understand each other better?" This statement is clear, non-accusatory, and invites conversation. It focuses on the need for connection rather than blaming the other person for the disconnect. Let's take a real-world example from a relationship setting. Sarah and David have been dating for over a year. Lately, Sarah has noticed that David seems distracted and distant. Instead of bottling up her feelings, she decides to address the issue directly. One evening, as they're sitting on the couch together, she turns to him and says, "I've noticed that we haven't been connecting as much lately. I miss talking with you like we used to. What do you think is going on?" David opens up about the stress he's been feeling at work, and Sarah listens without judgment. They both agree to make more time for each other, and over the next few weeks, they prioritize deeper conversations and quality time together. The result? Their emotional intimacy grows stronger, and they both feel more connected than ever. Your tiny action for today? Think about the last time you felt emotionally distant from your partner. What need wasn't being met at that moment? Now, think of one thing you can do today to open the door for emotional connection. Maybe it's starting a conversation, setting aside time to reconnect, or simply expressing a need you've been holding back. The goal is to create a consistent pattern of emotional engagement that becomes the foundation of your relationship. Before we move forward, let's take a moment to practice. Close your eyes for a second and reflect on one small moment this week when you could have fostered emotional intimacy but didn't. Now, think about how you could have approached that situation differently. What could you have said or done to create a more emotionally connected moment? Reflecting on these moments will help you become more intentional in cultivating emotional intimacy moving forward. In the next section, we'll explore how to maintain this intimacy when life gets busy and how to prevent emotional disconnection from creeping back into your relationship. It's all about keeping the momentum going, even when things get tough. Section 4. Have you ever been in the middle of a conversation with your partner, only to feel like something is blocking you from truly connecting? You might have been talking about something important, but as the words leave your mouth, they don't quite land the way you expected. Instead of feeling heard and understood, you feel like there's a wall between you. This feeling isn't uncommon, it's the result of emotional barriers that prevent true connection. These barriers can take many forms: fear of vulnerability, past trauma, unresolved conflicts, or even a lack of trust. Whatever the cause, these emotional blocks can create a significant distance between you and your partner, and if left unchecked, they can erode the intimacy and closeness you both need. So, what are these emotional barriers, and why do they exist? To put it simply, emotional barriers are defense mechanisms we put up to protect ourselves from getting hurt. Maybe you've been hurt in past relationships, or perhaps you've experienced a significant emotional wound that hasn't fully healed. These experiences can make it difficult to be open and vulnerable with your partner. When you feel exposed or emotionally unsafe, your instinct is to protect yourself, often by building walls or shutting down emotionally. While these mechanisms might serve to protect you in the short term, in the long run, they prevent you from fully engaging with your partner and creating a deeper, more meaningful connection. It's important to recognize that emotional barriers aren't always conscious. Sometimes, we don't even realize we're putting up walls until it's too late. You might not even be aware that you're closing yourself off from your partner, but if you're constantly feeling distant or disconnected, that's a red flag. Emotional barriers can manifest in various ways: avoiding difficult conversations, withdrawing when your partner reaches out, or even becoming defensive when they ask you to open up. If these patterns are left unchecked, they can become deeply ingrained, creating a cycle of emotional distance and frustration. Let's take a moment to reflect. Have you ever caught yourself pulling away when your partner tries to have a deep or vulnerable conversation? Do you ever find yourself avoiding certain topics because you're afraid of how they might make you feel? If so, you're not alone. Emotional avoidance is one of the most common ways that people protect themselves from the fear of emotional pain. But here's the problem: avoiding emotions doesn't make them go away. In fact, it often makes things worse. When you avoid difficult conversations or emotional vulnerability, the issues don't get resolved, they just build up over time, creating more emotional distance. So, what can you do to overcome these emotional barriers and open up to deeper connection? The first step is acknowledging that these barriers exist. You have to be honest with yourself about what's blocking you from connecting with your partner. Are you afraid of being vulnerable because you've been hurt before? Do you find it hard to trust because of past betrayals or emotional wounds? The more you can identify these barriers, the better equipped you'll be to address them head-on. Once you've identified the emotional blocks, the next step is to start working through them, one by one. Overcoming emotional barriers doesn't happen overnight, and it requires patience and self-compassion. Start by allowing yourself to feel the emotions you've been avoiding. If you've been pushing down feelings of hurt, anger, or sadness, take a moment to sit with them. Acknowledge them. Feel them. You don't have to act on them right away, but it's important to give yourself permission to experience your emotions fully. When you suppress your feelings, they only intensify over time. But when you allow yourself to feel them, you create space for healing and growth. The next step is to practice vulnerability. Vulnerability is the antidote to emotional barriers. It's the willingness to expose your true self, including your fears, insecurities, and desires, without the fear of judgment or rejection. Being vulnerable doesn't mean dumping all your emotions on your partner or expecting them to fix everything. It simply means showing up authentically and allowing yourself to be seen, flaws and all. Vulnerability is an act of courage. It's the willingness to take the emotional risk of being open, even when you're unsure of the outcome. A simple way to practice vulnerability is by sharing something small but meaningful with your partner. Maybe it's a fear you've been carrying or a need you've been avoiding. For example, you could say, "I've been feeling a little disconnected lately, and I need more time with you. I know I've been distant, and I want to work on that." This simple statement is a form of vulnerability. It acknowledges your own emotional need and opens the door for your partner to do the same. Vulnerability is about creating a safe space for both of you to express your feelings, without judgment or defensiveness. But what if your partner doesn't respond the way you expect? What if they seem distant or defensive themselves? In these moments, it's important to remember that emotional barriers are often deeply ingrained. Your partner may have their own fears or wounds that are preventing them from fully engaging. The key is not to take it personally. Instead, stay grounded in your own vulnerability and create space for the conversation to unfold slowly. Healing takes time, and emotional intimacy is built step by step. If your partner isn't ready to open up, don't force it. Keep the door open, and with time, they may feel more comfortable sharing their own vulnerabilities. Let's break this down with an example. Imagine you've been feeling emotionally distant from your partner, and you decide to open up about it. You say, "I've noticed that we haven't been spending as much time together, and I miss our connection. It's been hard for me to feel close to you lately, and I want to work through it." Your partner might respond with a shrug or even deflect the conversation. In the past, you might have shut down or retreated emotionally, but this time, you stay present. You don't get defensive. Instead, you simply say, "I understand that this might be hard to talk about, but it's important to me that we address it. I want us to feel close again." This approach works because it's rooted in vulnerability and compassion. You're not attacking your partner or making them feel guilty. Instead, you're simply expressing your needs and opening the door for deeper emotional connection. Even if the conversation doesn't go perfectly, you've taken the first step toward overcoming the emotional barriers that were keeping you both at a distance. A tiny action for today: think about one emotional barrier you've been carrying, whether it's fear, past hurt, or emotional avoidance. Identify it, and then take a small step to address it. Maybe it's starting a conversation with your partner or simply acknowledging your feelings to yourself. This small act of vulnerability can help break down the emotional walls that are preventing true connection. Before we move on, let's take a moment to practice. Close your eyes and think about the emotional barriers you've been carrying. What fear or hurt is keeping you from fully connecting with your partner? Sit with that feeling for a moment. Now, ask yourself, what's one small step I can take today to begin overcoming this barrier? Breathe deeply and reflect on how you can move forward, step by step, toward a more open, vulnerable relationship. In the next section, we'll explore how to turn emotional vulnerability into lasting change and how to maintain emotional intimacy even when life gets in the way. Emotional barriers may be tough, but with the right tools and mindset, you can break them down and rebuild a deeper, more fulfilling connection with your partner. Section 5. In every relationship, there comes a point when you realize that certain lines have been crossed, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe it's something small, like a comment that's gone unaddressed, or something bigger, like a repeated violation of your emotional needs. Regardless of the situation, the key to maintaining a healthy relationship is setting boundaries, clear, respectful, and firm boundaries that protect your emotional well-being. But here's the problem: setting boundaries is hard. It feels uncomfortable at first, and it can bring up fears of rejection, conflict, or even pushing your partner away. For many, setting boundaries feels like an act of self-preservation, something you do only when you're at your breaking point. But here's the truth: boundaries aren't just about protecting yourself when you're on the verge of burnout. They're a fundamental part of any healthy relationship, and they're necessary for fostering mutual respect, trust, and emotional intimacy. Let's take a step back for a moment. Think about the last time you felt emotionally drained by your partner. Maybe they made a comment that hurt you, or perhaps they crossed the line by not respecting your time or personal space. How did you respond at that moment? Did you stay silent, hoping things would improve on their own? Or did you speak up and let them know how you felt? If you're like many people, you probably didn't say anything. Maybe you thought, "It's not a big deal," or "I don't want to make a fuss." But here's the problem: if you don't set boundaries when these small issues arise, they'll start building up over time, and you'll find yourself in a situation where you feel resentful, overwhelmed, and disconnected. Here's the truth: your feelings matter. Your emotional health matters. And the only way to preserve both is to set boundaries that allow you to maintain your sense of self, your personal space, and your emotional well-being. Without boundaries, you run the risk of losing yourself in the relationship, of becoming so enmeshed with your partner that you no longer know where you end and they begin. This is what can lead to emotional burnout, resentment, and even the collapse of the relationship. Boundaries create a space for both you and your partner to be your authentic selves, while also respecting each other's needs and limits. But how do you set boundaries, especially when it feels uncomfortable or risky? The first step is recognizing that boundaries aren't about control or punishment, they're about mutual respect. Boundaries are not walls that keep your partner out, rather, they are guidelines that help both of you stay connected while respecting each other's individual needs and identities. Setting boundaries means saying no when something doesn't feel right or when something is draining you emotionally. It means communicating your needs clearly and calmly, without guilt or shame. And it means prioritizing your emotional health, even when it feels difficult or inconvenient. For example, let's say you've been feeling emotionally overwhelmed by your partner's constant texting throughout the day. You're working, you're trying to focus, and every time your phone buzzes, it pulls you out of your flow. You've been tolerating it, hoping that they'll eventually stop, but it's starting to affect your productivity and your emotional state. Instead of getting frustrated or anxious every time the text notifications go off, it's time to set a boundary. You could say, "I love that we communicate so often, but I need to have uninterrupted time during my work hours. I'm going to mute notifications during the day, and I'll check my phone during breaks." This boundary is clear, respectful, and doesn't involve blaming your partner. It's simply communicating what you need to maintain your emotional well-being. Now, let's break down why this approach works. Boundaries work because they create clear guidelines that help both partners understand each other's needs. When you communicate your boundaries in a calm, respectful manner, your partner has the opportunity to understand where you're coming from. They can then adjust their behavior to meet your needs, just as you would adjust yours to meet theirs. Boundaries are not about punishing or limiting your partner, they're about creating a space where both people feel heard, understood, and respected. When both partners honor each other's boundaries, the relationship becomes a safe, supportive environment where emotional intimacy can thrive. The challenge with setting boundaries is that it often brings up uncomfortable emotions, fear, guilt, or anxiety. You might fear that your partner will get upset, or that they'll think you're being too demanding. But here's the thing: setting boundaries isn't about being rigid or inflexible, it's about communicating your needs in a way that creates a healthier, more balanced dynamic. Your partner may initially resist, but with time, they'll come to respect and appreciate your boundaries because it shows that you value your own well-being and that you're committed to the health of the relationship. One of the most important things to remember when setting boundaries is that it's okay to say no. For many people, saying no feels uncomfortable, especially in a relationship where you're worried about disappointing your partner. But the truth is, saying no is not only healthy, it's necessary. When you say no to things that drain you, you're saying yes to your emotional health and your own happiness. Boundaries create a space for you to be yourself, without sacrificing your needs for the sake of others. Here's a microscript that you can use when you need to set a boundary. I really need to take some time for myself right now. I love spending time with you, but I need some space to recharge. Let's catch up later. This is clear, respectful, and considerate of both your needs and your partner's. It allows you to maintain your emotional well-being while also showing care and respect for your partner. Let's take a look at a real-world example. Sarah and David have been dating for 6 months, and lately, Sarah has been feeling emotionally drained. David often texts her during work hours, wanting to chat about their plans for the evening, but Sarah finds it hard to concentrate on her work with the constant interruptions. She's been letting it slide, but now it's starting to affect her productivity and her peace of mind. So, Sarah decides to set a boundary. She says to David, "I really value our time together, but I need some uninterrupted time during the day to focus on my work. I'll check my phone during my breaks, but I need to mute notifications during work hours. Is that okay with you?" David appreciates her honesty and understands her need for personal space. From then on, they both make a point to honor this boundary, and Sarah feels less overwhelmed and more connected to David when they spend time together. Now, let's talk about the tiny action you can take today. Think about one area of your relationship where you've been tolerating something that drains you emotionally, whether it's a behavior, a conversation, or a situation. What is one small boundary you can set to protect your emotional health? It might be something as simple as saying no to a request or taking a break when you feel overwhelmed. Start small, but start today. Before we move on, let's practice setting a boundary. Close your eyes for a moment and think about a situation where you feel emotionally drained. Now, imagine yourself calmly and respectfully setting a boundary in that moment. What would you say to ensure your emotional needs are respected? Practice that statement in your mind, and take note of how it feels to assert your boundaries confidently. In the next section, we'll dive into how to maintain these boundaries in your relationship, even when life gets busy or when your partner challenges them. Setting boundaries is just the first step. Learning how to maintain and reinforce them is key to ensuring that both you and your partner can thrive emotionally. Section 6. Trust is the foundation of any healthy relationship. Without trust, emotional intimacy cannot thrive, and without emotional intimacy, relationships tend to falter. But trust doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It's built over time through actions, consistency, and mutual respect. It's the quiet understanding that your partner will be there when they say they will, that their words align with their actions, and that you can count on them not to betray your confidence. However, building trust is not always easy, especially if trust has been broken in the past. Whether it's due to a betrayal, miscommunication, or unmet expectations, trust issues can create barriers to emotional closeness. But how do you rebuild trust once it's been shaken? And how can you maintain a strong foundation of trust throughout your relationship, even when life gets difficult? The first step is to recognize that trust is earned through consistent, small actions. It's not something you demand or expect, and it's not something that's automatically granted just because you're in a relationship. Trust is a process. It's the result of demonstrating reliability, honesty, and respect for each other's needs over time. If you want to build a strong trust dynamic in your relationship, you have to start with the basics: clear communication, transparency, and following through on what you say you're going to do. Think about it. Have you ever been let down by someone who didn't keep their promises or who acted inconsistently? Perhaps they said one thing but did another, leaving you confused or even hurt. In those moments, trust is damaged. The more this happens, the harder it becomes to rebuild trust. But if you can demonstrate consistent behavior that aligns with your words, trust begins to grow. It's like laying brick by brick, building a sturdy foundation that can withstand the inevitable storms of life. The second key aspect of building trust is emotional honesty. This means being open about your thoughts, feelings, and intentions, without fear of judgment. Being emotionally honest doesn't mean sharing everything all the time, but it does mean not withholding important information or hiding your true feelings out of fear. When you hide or suppress your emotions, you create a distance between yourself and your partner, and this emotional distance erodes trust. For instance, if something is bothering you, don't let it fester. Express it calmly and respectfully, even if it's uncomfortable. "I've been feeling a little overwhelmed lately because we've been so busy, and I need more time for us to connect," is an honest and vulnerable statement. This type of honesty fosters trust because it shows that you value your partner enough to be open about your emotional state. And it creates a safe space for your partner to do the same. But being emotionally honest also means owning up to your mistakes. We all make mistakes, no one is perfect. But when we own up to our shortcomings and take responsibility for our actions, it strengthens trust in the relationship. It shows that we are accountable and that we respect our partner enough to be transparent about our flaws. For example, if you miss an important event or forget to follow through on a commitment, instead of making excuses, simply admit it. "I didn't keep my promise, and I'm sorry. I know it lets you down, and I want to do better." This simple act of owning your mistakes shows that you're committed to being honest and reliable. Here's an example from a relationship. Sarah and John have been together for a few years. One evening, Sarah notices that John is distracted, and it's clear he's avoiding talking about something that's been bothering him. Instead of pressing him right away, Sarah gives him space. The next morning, Sarah gently asks, "Is everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." John opens up and admits that he's been stressed at work and hasn't been feeling emotionally connected to her lately. Instead of getting defensive or upset, Sarah listens, reassures him that she understands, and expresses her own need for more emotional connection. This simple exchange shows emotional honesty. It's not about avoiding difficult conversations but about embracing vulnerability and creating a space where both partners feel safe to share their feelings. By addressing the issue directly and respectfully, Sarah and John can begin the process of rebuilding their emotional connection, which ultimately strengthens their trust. Why does emotional honesty work in building trust? It works because it fosters a sense of mutual respect. When you communicate openly about your emotions and needs, you're showing that you trust your partner enough to be vulnerable. And when your partner reciprocates, you both create a safe environment where trust can thrive. There's no need for secrets, and no room for misunderstandings, just open, honest communication that keeps you both grounded in mutual respect and understanding. Let's talk about another critical aspect of trust: consistency. Trust isn't built overnight, it's cultivated through everyday actions. Being consistent means showing up for your partner in small but meaningful ways, day after day. If you say you're going to be there for them, you follow through. If you commit to something, you do it. If you promise to listen, you listen with full attention. It's not about grand gestures, it's about the little things that add up over time. When you're consistently there for your partner, emotionally and physically, you're reinforcing trust. Here's a simple microscript that you can use when working to rebuild trust. "I understand why you're upset, and I'm committed to showing you through my actions that you can rely on me." This line communicates accountability and a willingness to put in the effort needed to rebuild trust. It's not just about saying the right words, it's about backing them up with actions. In real-life situations, consistency might look like this. Let's say you and your partner agree to have dinner together every Friday night as a way to reconnect. You've missed a few weeks because of work commitments, and your partner has started feeling neglected. To rebuild trust, you need to show consistency. Even if it's a busy week, you make time for your Friday dinner and reaffirm that your relationship is a priority. Over time, this consistency reassures your partner that you value the relationship and that you can be counted on. Building trust also means respecting each other's emotional boundaries. Every individual has emotional limits, things they're willing to share, and things they're not. Trust is cultivated when both partners feel safe respecting those boundaries. Pushing someone too hard to open up before they're ready only weakens trust. Conversely, respecting these boundaries fosters a sense of security, allowing each person to share at their own pace, knowing they won't be judged or pressured. Now, what's a tiny action you can take today to begin building or rebuilding trust in your relationship? It's simple. Pick one small promise or commitment you can make to your partner today, and follow through. Whether it's making time for a meaningful conversation, showing up when you said you would, or taking responsibility for something you've overlooked, following through on even the smallest commitments sends the message that you're trustworthy and reliable. Consistency is key in fostering long-term trust. Before we move forward, let's take a moment to reflect. Think about a situation where you could have been more consistent in building trust. What small commitment could you make today to demonstrate your reliability? Consider how it might affect the emotional atmosphere in your relationship if you honored that commitment. In the next section, we'll explore how to deal with trust issues when they arise and how to repair the damage caused by broken trust. The goal is not to avoid trust challenges but to address them head-on, creating a stronger and more resilient relationship. Section 7. Conflict is inevitable in any relationship. Disagreements, differing opinions, and emotional tension are part of what makes us human. But conflict doesn't have to be destructive. In fact, when approached with the right mindset, conflict can serve as an opportunity for growth, deeper understanding, and stronger connection. The key is not avoiding conflict, but navigating it in a way that is compassionate, constructive, and respectful. Let's start by recognizing something important. Conflict is not the problem. It's how we handle it that makes the difference. In many relationships, conflict is handled poorly, through yelling, blaming, or shutting down emotionally. These approaches only escalate the situation and create further distance between partners. But it doesn't have to be this way. When conflict arises, you have the power to choose how you respond. You can either react impulsively or choose to respond with intention, using the tools of emotional intelligence, empathy, and communication. Let's take a moment to think about your last argument or disagreement with your partner. What was the issue, and how did it unfold? Did you raise your voice? Did you get defensive or shut down? Did the argument leave you both feeling more disconnected than before? If so, you're not alone. Many couples experience this cycle, where conflict leads to more conflict, and neither person feels heard or understood. But what if you could break this cycle? What if you could approach conflict in a way that strengthens your bond instead of weakening it? The first step in navigating conflict with compassion is to reframe how you view conflict. Rather than seeing it as a threat to the relationship, view it as an opportunity to understand each other better. Conflict often arises because two people have different perspectives, needs, or desires. By approaching the disagreement with curiosity, rather than judgment, you open the door for meaningful dialogue. Ask yourself, what does my partner need at this moment? What do they want to express? How can I listen in a way that fosters understanding rather than defensiveness? This shift in perspective can be transformative. When you approach conflict with the goal of understanding, rather than winning, you create an environment where both partners feel safe to express their feelings without fear of attack or dismissal. This is where emotional intelligence comes in. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and manage your own emotions, as well as understand and influence the emotions of others. In the context of conflict, emotional intelligence helps you stay grounded, even when emotions are running high. It allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively, which is key to de-escalating tension and fostering understanding. So, how can you apply emotional intelligence in conflict? The first step is to stay calm. When emotions are running high, it's easy to say things you don't mean or escalate the situation unintentionally. But by taking a deep breath and staying grounded, you give yourself the space to respond thoughtfully. You don't have to have all the answers in the moment, but you can create space for both you and your partner to process your emotions. The next step is to listen actively. Active listening means being fully present and engaged in the conversation. It's about focusing on what your partner is saying, rather than formulating your response while they're talking. Active listening involves not just hearing the words, but also understanding the underlying emotions. For example, if your partner says, "I'm frustrated because I feel like I'm always the one who has to make decisions," don't immediately counter with, "Well, I'm always busy with work, and you don't understand how stressed I am." Instead, listen to the underlying frustration and validate it. You might say something like, "I hear that you feel frustrated because you're carrying the weight of decision making, and I can see how that would be overwhelming." This shows your partner that you are truly listening and that you value their perspective. When you listen actively, you also create the space for your partner to feel heard and understood. This is crucial because when people don't feel heard in a conflict, they tend to get defensive and the argument escalates. Active listening helps you avoid that cycle, and it invites your partner to engage in a more constructive way. Once you've listened and understood your partner's perspective, the next step is to communicate your own feelings and needs clearly. This doesn't mean blaming your partner or criticizing them for their behavior. Instead, focus on how the situation makes you feel and what you need in order to feel heard and understood. For example, rather than saying, "You never listen to me," try saying, "I feel unheard when we're arguing because I don't feel like my perspective is being considered. What I need is for us to both take a step back and listen to each other's feelings without interrupting." This approach expresses your feelings in a way that encourages understanding and resolution, rather than escalating the conflict. In a real-world example, let's say you and your partner are arguing about how to spend your weekend. You want to relax at home, but your partner wants to go out and do something adventurous. Instead of immediately reacting with frustration or dismissing their desire to go out, take a step back and listen to what they're really asking for. Maybe they want to connect with you, or they're feeling stressed and need a change of scenery. By understanding their deeper need, you can respond in a way that addresses both of your desires. You could say, "I understand that you want to get out and do something fun, but I'm feeling really tired and need some time to recharge. Can we find a compromise where we can both get what we need?" This approach fosters cooperation and reduces the likelihood of a power struggle. But even with the best intentions, conflict can still be tough. What happens when your partner becomes defensive, angry, or shuts down emotionally? In these moments, it's crucial to remain calm and avoid reacting impulsively. If your partner is getting defensive, it's usually because they feel threatened or misunderstood. Instead of escalating the conflict by raising your voice or getting frustrated, try using I statements to express how you're feeling. For example, "I'm feeling hurt because I don't think you understand where I'm coming from," rather than "You never listen to me." This subtle shift in language helps de-escalate the situation and encourages a more productive conversation. Let's take a tiny action today. When you feel conflict brewing, stop and take a moment to breathe. Rather than reacting impulsively, pause, gather your thoughts, and respond with empathy and understanding. Whether it's a small disagreement or a larger issue, this small action can make all the difference in how the conflict unfolds. Before we move on, let's practice. Think about a recent argument or disagreement with your partner. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine how you could have responded differently. How could you have approached the situation with more empathy and understanding? Visualize yourself staying calm, listening actively, and responding with respect and compassion. In the next section, we'll explore how to prevent recurring conflicts from sabotaging your relationship and how to build long-term emotional resilience together. Section 8. In any healthy relationship, growth is essential, not just as individuals, but as a couple. Think about the relationships that truly stand the test of time. What makes them last? It's not just love, but the shared commitment to growing together, facing challenges as a team, and continuously supporting each other's personal and collective goals. Relationships, like anything else in life, need nourishment to thrive. That nourishment comes through mutual support, shared values, and the willingness to grow alongside one another. But growth isn't always easy. It requires intentional effort, vulnerability, and a willingness to face the discomfort that comes with change. It's easy to get comfortable in the familiar patterns of a relationship, but when you stop growing together, you start growing apart. This is why it's crucial to continuously invest in both the relationship itself and your personal development within it. When you and your partner are aligned in your goals and aspirations, your connection deepens and your bond strengthens. Let's take a moment to reflect. What are your goals as an individual, and how do they fit into your relationship? Do you and your partner have shared aspirations, or do you feel like you're moving in different directions? It's not uncommon for couples to have different interests and goals, but the key is to find common ground and actively support each other's growth. When you're both working towards something together, whether it's building a future, improving communication, or pursuing personal passions, the relationship becomes a shared journey rather than a solitary experience. The first step in strengthening your relationship through shared goals is to identify what those goals are. This isn't just about the big life goals, getting married, buying a house, having children, but also about the smaller, more immediate goals that you both value. For example, do you both want to prioritize spending more quality time together? Or perhaps you share a desire to improve your communication skills or build financial security. These shared goals form the foundation of your relationship's growth. When you align on what's most important to both of you, you're better equipped to support each other and stay on track, even when challenges arise. Once you've identified your shared goals, it's essential to discuss how you can work towards them together. Communication is key here. Make sure you're both on the same page about what each goal entails and how you can contribute to achieving it. For example, if one of your goals is to improve communication, both partners need to agree on the importance of open, honest, and respectful conversations. This might involve setting aside time for regular check-ins or making an effort to listen actively when one person is speaking. Similarly, if financial security is a shared goal, you might need to work together on budgeting, saving, or investing. It's not enough to simply have goals, you need to put in the effort to achieve them together. This process of setting and working towards shared goals also helps build a sense of teamwork within the relationship. When you both see the bigger picture and recognize that your individual actions contribute to a collective outcome, the relationship feels less like a series of isolated interactions and more like a partnership. A strong partnership is rooted in shared responsibility and mutual accountability, where both people are working toward the same objective and holding each other to that standard. Think about how this looks in practice. For example, let's say that both you and your partner agree that spending more quality time together is a goal. Life can get busy, work, responsibilities, and daily tasks often get in the way of connecting on a deeper level. But if you're both committed to this shared goal, you'll find ways to prioritize it. This could mean scheduling regular date nights, planning weekend getaways, or simply setting aside time each day to talk without distractions. The key is that both of you are invested in making this happen, and you actively find ways to support each other in achieving the goal. But shared goals aren't just about practical things like scheduling time together or managing finances, they're also about personal growth. A relationship is a dynamic, evolving entity, and if you're not both growing as individuals, the relationship can feel stagnant. That's why it's so important to support each other's personal development. Whether it's pursuing a new career, developing a new skill, or working on emotional intelligence, your personal growth feeds into the growth of the relationship. When you see each other striving for more, it inspires you to do the same. Now, let's talk about how this applies to real-life examples. Sarah and James have been together for a few years, and while they share many common interests, they've noticed that they've grown apart in certain areas. James is passionate about his career and has been working long hours to achieve his professional goals, while Sarah has been focused on her hobbies and personal development. They're both happy with their individual pursuits, but they realize that they're not spending as much time together as they used to. So, they have a conversation about their shared goal of strengthening their relationship. They both agree that they need to prioritize time together, so they set aside one night a week for a date night. No phones, no distractions, just quality time to reconnect. They also talk about their individual goals and how they can support each other in pursuing them. For Sarah, this might mean helping James with his work-life balance, while for James, it might mean encouraging Sarah to pursue her own passions and ambitions. This shared commitment to growth, both individually and as a couple, helps Sarah and James feel more connected. Their relationship isn't just about coexisting, it's about evolving together, supporting each other's dreams, and actively working towards common goals. It's a dynamic, fulfilling partnership. The challenge, however, is that growth doesn't always happen in a straight line. Sometimes, life throws unexpected challenges your way: illness, financial setbacks, or personal struggles. These obstacles can create tension and strain in the relationship, especially if your goals are temporarily put on hold. But the key to navigating these tough times is resilience. When you've built a strong foundation based on shared goals, trust, and respect, you're better equipped to weather life's storms together. The important thing is to keep the lines of communication open and continue to support each other, even when things don't go according to plan. One tiny action you can take today is to sit down with your partner and have an open conversation about your shared goals. Ask each other what you both want to achieve in the short term and long term, both individually and as a couple. Talk about how you can support each other in reaching those goals. This simple conversation will help you realign and reconnect on a deeper level, strengthening your bond and setting the stage for continued growth. Before we move on, let's take a moment to practice. Close your eyes and think about one personal goal you've been working on. Now, think about how your partner can support you in achieving that goal. Visualize them actively encouraging you, offering help when needed, and celebrating your progress. This visualization exercise will remind you of the power of partnership in achieving your dreams and goals. In the next section, we'll explore how to maintain the momentum of growth in your relationship and how to keep supporting each other through the ups and downs that life inevitably brings. Section 9. Imagine it's a Saturday afternoon, and you and your partner have just finished a long week. The stress of work, the chaos of life, and the everyday responsibilities have worn you both down. But instead of enjoying the weekend together, there's a noticeable tension in the air. You've both been distant, caught up in your own worlds. You try to strike up a conversation, but it falls flat. The silence is deafening, and you feel that old, familiar sense of emotional disconnection creeping back in. But this time, something is different. You remember the tools you've learned. You remember the power of vulnerability, the importance of active listening, and the need for clear communication. You take a deep breath and decide to approach the situation differently. You start by recognizing the emotional barrier that's been building up. In the past, you might have let it fester, quietly resenting each other without addressing the issue. But today, you decide to break the pattern. You turn to your partner and say, "I've noticed that we've both been feeling a bit distant lately. I miss our connection, and I want to talk about what's going on." This isn't an accusation, it's an invitation for an open, honest conversation. Your partner looks at you, and for a moment, there's silence. But then they respond, "Yeah, I've been feeling the same way." It's like we're both going through the motions, but we're not really connecting. You've both acknowledged the problem without blame. The emotional barrier that has been blocking your connection is now being addressed. In this moment, you apply the principle of active listening. You make sure to listen fully to your partner, not just to respond, but to understand their feelings. "Tell me more about how you're feeling," you say, genuinely wanting to hear their perspective. Your partner opens up, sharing the stress they've been dealing with at work and the exhaustion they're feeling. You listen, validating their emotions, and make sure to show empathy. "I can see how overwhelming that must be. I get it." By acknowledging their feelings and truly listening, you create a space where your partner feels heard and understood. And in return, you feel seen as well. This is where emotional intimacy begins to rebuild. You're no longer speaking past each other. Instead, you're engaging in a meaningful, respectful exchange. Now, it's time for the next step: clear communication. You express your own feelings honestly, saying, "I've been feeling disconnected too. I miss spending quality time with you, and I think we've both been caught up in other things. I want to find a way to reconnect." Your partner doesn't take this as an attack. They understand it's a shared issue, and together, you begin to figure out a solution. You suggest a small but significant step. "What if we spend an hour tonight, just the two of us, no phones, no distractions? We could talk, maybe watch a movie, and just be present with each other." This simple request is a way of reconnecting and prioritizing the relationship. Your partner agrees, relieved that the space is being created for a genuine connection. Throughout this conversation, you apply the principles of vulnerability and compassion. Neither of you is blaming the other or defending your actions. Instead, you are both open about your needs and willing to make changes to support each other's emotional well-being. The conversation flows with empathy and respect, reinforcing the trust and emotional connection you've been building. Later that evening, when you sit down together for your uninterrupted time, something shifts. The emotional distance that had been hanging in the air begins to dissolve. You talk about your week, share your thoughts and feelings, and enjoy each other's company. The tension that had been there earlier in the day is replaced with a sense of closeness and understanding. It's not perfect, and it's not a magical fix, but it's progress. You've both taken small but significant steps toward rebuilding your emotional intimacy, and it feels good to be in sync again. But the most important takeaway from this moment isn't that you had a good evening together, it's that you used the tools you've learned to navigate the situation differently. You didn't avoid the problem or let it fester. You addressed it directly, with honesty and vulnerability. You listened actively, communicated your needs clearly, and worked together to find a solution. And most importantly, you reinforced the emotional connection between you, creating a foundation for continued growth. This scenario is just one example of how the tools we've discussed can be applied in real life. The key is to remember that emotional connection is not something that happens by chance, it's something that takes consistent effort, mutual respect, and open communication. By using these tools, active listening, vulnerability, clear communication, and compassion, you can navigate conflict and rebuild emotional intimacy whenever it starts to fade. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on your own relationship. When was the last time you and your partner had a meaningful, emotionally connected conversation? How did it go? If it didn't go as well as you hoped, what tools could you have applied to make it more constructive? Remember, emotional connection is not a destination, it's an ongoing process that requires consistent effort from both partners. As we move into the next section, we'll explore how to keep the momentum going in your relationship, making sure that emotional connection remains strong, even in the face of challenges and distractions. The tools we've discussed are meant to be practiced regularly, not just when things feel difficult. The more you use them, the more natural they become, and the stronger your relationship will be. Section 10. We've covered a lot of ground in this lesson: how to address emotional disconnect, navigate conflict with compassion, set boundaries, build trust, and ultimately strengthen your relationship through emotional intimacy and shared growth. These tools are not just abstract concepts, they are actionable strategies you can apply in your relationship today to create deeper connection and mutual respect. At its core, the lesson has been about one thing: moving from reacting impulsively to responding intentionally. Whether you're feeling disconnected, frustrated, or overwhelmed, you now have the tools to step back, assess the situation, and approach it with empathy, understanding, and clarity. Rather than letting emotions dictate your behavior, you can now use emotional intelligence to stay grounded and engaged with your partner. First, we explored the power of recognizing emotional disconnect. We discussed how loneliness in a relationship doesn't necessarily indicate failure, but rather unmet needs. The key to breaking this pattern is identifying those needs and communicating them clearly, without blame or defensiveness. This shifts the dynamic from frustration to collaboration. Next, we dug into emotional intimacy and how to cultivate a deeper connection with your partner. Emotional intimacy isn't about being perfect or never disagreeing, it's about vulnerability, honesty, and the willingness to show up for each other, even when it's uncomfortable. When you prioritize emotional connection, you create a foundation for lasting intimacy that can withstand life's challenges. In following sections, we learned how to set healthy boundaries. Boundaries aren't about building walls, they're about protecting your emotional well-being while respecting your partner's needs. Boundaries are essential for maintaining a balanced relationship where both partners feel valued and heard. By setting boundaries with compassion, you create space for growth, trust, and respect. We then focused on building trust through consistency, emotional honesty, and reliability. Trust is earned through small, everyday actions, keeping promises, being emotionally available, and supporting each other's growth. When trust is strong, so is the emotional connection between you and your partner. Trust is the foundation that supports every other aspect of your relationship. In the next section, we explored how to navigate conflict with understanding. Conflict doesn't have to be destructive. In fact, when approached with empathy and a mindset of curiosity, it can strengthen your bond. The key is to listen actively, communicate clearly, and respond with compassion, rather than react impulsively. These tools help create an environment where both partners feel heard and disagreements become opportunities for growth. We also discussed the importance of shared goals and growth. Relationships thrive when both partners are working towards common goals, both individually and together. Whether it's personal growth, career aspirations, or building a life together, shared goals create a sense of teamwork and purpose. By supporting each other's ambitions, you not only strengthen the relationship but also create a partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared vision. Now, as we wrap up, let's focus on what you can do today. Here are 3 actionable steps you can take to apply the tools you've learned in this lesson. Have a vulnerable conversation. Think about one emotional need you've been avoiding expressing, and share it with your partner. Be honest and clear about how you're feeling, and listen to their response with empathy. This conversation can be a powerful step towards reestablishing emotional intimacy. Set one boundary. Identify one area of your relationship where you feel your emotional health is being compromised. Set a clear, respectful boundary to protect your well-being. Whether it's creating space for yourself, communicating your needs, or asking for more quality time, this small act can create a significant shift in your relationship. Make a plan for shared growth. Sit down with your partner and discuss one goal you both want to work towards, whether it's improving communication, spending more time together, or supporting each other's personal growth. Create an actionable plan to achieve it, and support each other every step of the way. Finally, if you've found this lesson helpful, you'll want to watch the next episode, where we'll go deeper into how to maintain emotional intimacy and resilience in long-term relationships. We'll explore strategies for keeping the connection strong even when life gets busy, and how to keep growing together in the face of challenges. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.